Quick, what's the meta for Season 3, 11.2 in terms of DPS, baby? Oh, you don't know? Oh, we probably don't either, but we will take a most educated guess by looking at all of the performances that we've seen on the PTR from all of the DPS specs and take a good guess based off of their design, toolkit, numbers, damage, and the dungeon pool to kind of see exactly what the meta will be in today's video on DPS predictions for 11.2. First on the list, Frost Death Knight, and the first contender for S+ tier. Get in there, man. Jesus, you deserve it. You deserve it, little Frost DK. S+ is basically what we actually believe will be meta. Of course, it's still a prediction, by the way. It's based off of the numbers and the tuning and all of that, but it is still a prediction. Frost DK is looking like it's actually better than it was in Season 1, and in Season 1 it was kind of a meta spec. I think it was used in the highest keys possible, if I recall correctly. So it wouldn't be surprising that it's now back, and this is exciting because we haven't had Frost DK be meta ever, and now we have it twice in the same expansion. It's looking good for Frost DK. I won't bore you with all the details. It's doing a lot of damage. It's a DK that has a lot of grips, which are good. No more Abomination Limb, but that's gonna come in handy when we look at Unholy DK, which goes all the way down into the S tier. Now, Unholy DK does a lot of damage, despite everybody's criticism on its rework, Marcelians and myself included. Unholy still doing really well. Now, it depends exactly how the tuning goes, since most people are actually just playing Frost, so it's very hard to judge the performance on Unholy because most of the DKs don't play Unholy at the moment. But from what we've seen, it's absolutely destroying, and I think that's probably going to be necessary to keep people engaged with this new, very controversial rework that it has going for it in 11.2. Similar to how our Patreon page is controversial, it's not. But it does have spicy things that you may not see on the channel almost ever. Spicy things like bloopers, inside scoops on future content, and on top of that, you're actually supporting this content and a bunch of other stuff that's coming in the next couple of weeks. Very fun indeed, one of which is the player profile that Marcelian has cooked up for you guys in Season 3, and the week cross that I will be cooking up for you guys in Season 3, which patrons have early access. They're, of course, going to be free for everybody. You don't have to pay for them or anything, but we do actually discuss it directly with patrons when it comes to feedback on how you want these to perform. And as a kind of like a thank you for supporting our content for all of these years, we like to go and show you a little bit of love back. So patreon.com/marcelianonline. We couldn't be doing these videos without the support of you guys. We love you so much. Thank you for considering being a part of the team. And let's kick off Season 3 with a bang. Almost as big as Havoc Demon Hunter's bang, which is not that big of a bang, but it is a bigger bang than it has been in the past. Now we expect Havoc to be S tier. S tier. So, okay, so let me tell you what S tier means. S tier essentially means they're kind of like one buff away from being a meta spec. Now, of course, there's a lot of other things to take into consideration, like party composition, utility kit. Is Vengeance going to be meta? Because then if you buff Havoc, you probably won't want two Demon Hunters in the same party, right? So it would have to be like better than Vengeance. But as far as Havoc is concerned, it's doing like crazy damage. It has really good funnel with the Eldrachi playstyle, which we have seen in the past seasons that it's really good to have in a party with like Giga AoE, to have like one or two specs that can really nail that single target, get those targets down ASAP. And probably for the first time in a very long time, Balanced Druid is down in the shitter. Now, Balanced Druid has been nerfed quite a bit, and I don't think they're going to keep the state of Balanced Druid as it is at the moment. However, in the way that things are looking, Balanced Druid is kind of like eating it. The problem is whether it's going to be meta or not. I think it kind of depends how good Resto Druid is, our opinion, because you'll definitely want a Druid in the top teams more often than not. I don't think it's going to be Bear, and spoiler alert, it's probably not going to be Feral either. Let's put Balanced Druid. So initially, I figured I would put it into C tier. I think that's probably fair. It's not going to be the bad spec, but the problem with Balanced Druid, which might even knock it down lower than this, is that it solely relies on doing Giga AoE damage and scaling. It doesn't really do a lot outside of those situations. Its single target is a little bit lackluster. Its priority damage is a little bit lackluster or actually non-existing. So the only redeeming quality for Balanced Druid is that once you pull about 3 packs, it does a lot of damage. But if Resto becomes the premier healer for the next season, although that's also up for debate, then you probably won't see Balanced Druid at all, because there are a couple of specs that might take its place, and those are part of the little surprise that we have for you guys, hopefully, but we'll see how things shape up. I am not sure where Feral goes. Feral seems to have slightly more damage than Balanced Druid right now, but it doesn't really feel like it scales as high as Balanced Druid. Maybe we can, you know, shift this around, but I don't think that matters very much. I haven't really seen Feral actually do really well on the PTR. I've played Feral myself. I wasn't really impressed by what Feral was doing. Feral only seems to be able to come online once you're, again, pulling like a gazillion mobs at once. That's probably going to be, I don't know, Gambit with Murlocs. But then again, Balanced Druid does the same thing, so I don't know. Part of the surprise that we have seen is Augmentation, and not for the reasons that you may think. Augmentation actually does a lot of damage right now, and recently has been buffed in its damage even more. So yes, it provides some support, which I believe that in the next couple of months/seasons, it will fully transition into a DPS spec with a utility kit rather than a support kit. And from the numbers that I've seen, Augmentation is doing quite a lot of damage, and considering that it adds a little bit of tankiness to the group, a little bit of a buff to the group's damage, I think there's a possibility that you can actually play Augmentation and not be a troll. Now, I don't think it's going to be meta just yet, but it is very close. This is the happiest surprise. Now, this is a Marcelian&Online 100% guaranteed cope, because I don't know how this lizard dragon is flying under the radar, but it's doing so much damage, bro. And it's been buffed again. Now, listen, Blizzard, don't nerf Devastation. Devastation hasn't really seen a spot in the light since it's been released, please. But it's looking like it's the replacement for Balanced Druid in terms of pure AoE. It has some decent single target. Like, I don't know exactly, I'm not a good Devastation player. I don't know the ins and outs of Devastation, but I've played Devastation not knowing what I'm doing. I'm just out DPSing Frost Decays. Excuse me? And I've seen some logs, bro. I've seen some logs. It's popping off. So let's see if it actually becomes meta. Beast Mastery Hunter is a peculiar one. I feel like this is coming, or going rather, back and forth on the PTR with the amount of buffs and nerfs that it's getting. Once again, I feel like it's like one decent buff away from being a meta spec. It's maybe not, maybe it can be even A tier, but it's just doing a lot of damage even after all of the nerfs. The problem is that Hunters don't usually bring stuff that people would like in a group. They don't really have a raid buff, and no, Hunter's Mark is not a raid buff, I'm sorry. And the utility is nice, however, you're not gonna need the Bloodlust from the Hunter, you're gonna definitely get it from a lot of other specs. Then you have some Soothes that might help, some Dispels maybe, but that's about it. All of the utility is good, but you need great for meta, right? And nothing that Hunter does is great. Except Marksmanship, which is like melting meters. Listen, you don't need to dispel, soothe, or trap, or stun anything if it just dies. And that's what Marksmanship is here to do. Once again, Hunter is kind of in like a peculiar spot because it's, you know, in a big spotlight right now where it can get nerfed just like any day. But I mean, I'm not convinced Marksmanship is going to be in the top comps, clearing the highest keys, since it is a Hunter and it's not the only spec that's doing very, very high damage, but it is doing so much more damage than everybody else that it kind of has to go here. It's by default has to be here. There's nothing else that I can say. For survival, dude, bro, there's very few or very little data on survival on the PTR at the moment, so it's very hard to gauge. There are some of the best survivals out there that are doing decent damage, but that's about it. Everything else is kind of like mediocre. I would normally think that Feral does a little bit more damage than survival, but from what I've seen on the PTR, it just seems that survival hunters are just out DPSing Feral. So, I mean, there you go. The same Hunter discussions apply to survival that we've talked with the other ones. Maybe unsurprisingly, and to the chagrin of a lot of people, Arcane is currently a meta spec. Now, similar to maybe Marksmanship, it's under the big spotlight, of course. We've probably had some tuning on, if not Arcane, then at least Mage every week so far, because I would imagine Blizzard is probably afraid in letting this be overpowered again. I don't know too much about the raid situation because Arcane has been doing really good in raids as well, so that kind of influences the damage that it might have in Mythic Plus, since the reason why you probably want Arcane in a group is for the priority damage, final damage, and all of that stuff, and which it still does. I don't know if it's stronger or weaker than in Season 2. It's very hard to tell because there were builds that focused a lot more in single targets, I think particularly for Spellslinger. and you could sacrifice a little bit more AoE for more priority damage. You could definitely do that. Whether that translates into being the case, we'll have to see. Fire Mage has been buffed and it's actually doing really well, but it's not quite yet at Arcane level because it did have its Ignite nerfed. Part of the reason why Fire Mage was such a good spec in Mythic Plus in past seasons and expansions, because it hasn't been meta until since then, was because of how efficient Ignite was as a source of damage, because you could just, you know, funnel one target and then just spread Ignite to everything else, which is what Arcane does, but Arcane does that better. And because Ignite has been nerfed, instead Pyroblast has been buffed, so it's seems like Fire is doing better single targets, so it might actually end up in S+ by the end. Now, I know what people are talking about when it comes to Frost Mage. And hear me out on this. Everybody's saying that Frost Mage is actually doing the most amount of damage on Sims than any other mage spec, and that's probably true, but that has been true in the past, and that didn't really push it into being a meta spec. His damage profile is a little bit lackluster. It depends exactly on how you actually end up playing it, because the two-target cleave doesn't really seem to be Frost Mage's forte anymore, but there are a couple of things that you might want to think about, like a Frost Mage in Halls of Atonement, where your tank might probably inevitably likely have to kite the dogs to drop some of the bleed stacks, and obviously having a Frost Mage makes that 100 times better, considering that most people will just fire their CCs off cooldown for whatever reason. They're likely going to be DR'd by the time the tank actually needs to move out, so having them being permanently slowed definitely helps. Now, I could be eating my own words, and Frost Mage could be bumped up to at least S tier by the end of the PTR cycle, but we'll see if that ends up being the case. Currently, Windwalker is down bad. I would have put it down into D tier. However, there are a couple of really pog Windwalkers out there that are really doing decent amount of damage for it to not be pumped down, but I don't believe it's going to scale all that highly once people figure out exactly how to pull big and once everybody has access to their ideal comps. Since on PTR, you might be playing with 2 or 3 friends that you usually play with on live, but if nobody's playing meta comps, you cannot really tell. And once meta comps are being established, Windwalker is probably going to be pretty poor. Particularly for the same reasons that balance is going to be here, because whenever Windwalker is going to be good in a team, you're probably going to be running a physical comp team similar to Season 2, and you will want 100% a Monk, and it's looking like that's definitely going to be Brewmaster rather than Windwalker at this point, and you're not going to run 2 Monks, that's definitely for sure, and the fact that you're AoE capped, that's not going to help you very much. Now, Ret Paladin has suffered big nerfs and then subsequent buffs as well. It does decent damage, but as it stands right now, I don't believe it's going to be any better, which is weird because I would not expect Ret Paladin to be a spec that will be overly nerfed, considering that it's the most popular spec. But it seems like Blizzard is not afraid to tone it down a peg and make sure that, there's other people that have room to actually push and do content with rather than just Ret Paladin all the time. Moving on to Shadow Priest, this spec has been on a roller coaster so far, and it just so happens that Priest might actually be really good next season. So I'm going to be putting Shadow into S tier. Its damage is really good, and it recently just got more buffs that are probably going to put Archon above everything else in the frontline spotlight of what Shadow is going to be doing. What's important is that if it doesn't end up being a Discipline Priest meta, which Discipline seems to be very strong, keep in mind we're going to have a video on it soon, then you're probably going to want a Shadow Priest because you do want those dispels. Shadow Priest, or let's say Priest buff for stamina, is actually decently good, considering that there's so many, almost one-shots as you push higher and higher into the keys. You're going to want that stamina. You're going to want Mind Soothe for the skips, and just, the pure dispel potential is good, although you might want dispel from a healer still. So I'm not convinced it's meta-worthy just yet. Assassination Rogue is close though. I would have wanted to put it into S tier, but I just haven't found enough assassinations cranking hard enough to compete with the S tier specs because it is a damage thing. Although if we are going to be talking about physical comps, you might be able to take Assassination. Now, Assassination is the Arcane Mage of the Rogue spec, more or less, because it does have probably the best priority damage depending on how the tuning goes. Technically, it has the best priority damage since you just funnel into one target and Caustic Spatter just hits everything else outside of your Crimson Tempest, which you rotate here and there. I can say the same thing about Outlaw, with just the fact that Outlaw just does so much more damage. This was kind of like a devastation level surprise. It doesn't do that much damage just yet, and it's debatable if you want Rogue in a meta comp, especially one that has, let's say, like a Mage and a Vengeance, Demon Hunter, although people have gotten used to the magic comp and a physical comp by now. But if you are going to have a physical comp, different like off meta shoot push thing that's just like a key below the magical comp, then you're definitely gonna have Outlaw as your Rogue spec 100%. It is probably right now the best physical DPS spec outside of marksmanship, let's say. Probably better than the Beast Mastery as well. Subtlety is also decently high, similar to Assassination. I just haven't found enough data on sub to support it being any higher, but it's not like it's not doing damage. It's definitely not the sub that has been suffering in the last couple of seasons at the beginning, where it kind of started from bottom and it slowly climbed higher and higher. Now it's likely that people will probably not play a lot of sub at the beginning of the season if it is decided that Outlaw is the shit. And if Outlaw is the shit, you're probably gonna start the season seeing Subtlety being way down low. But in terms of like the overall meta prediction, that might shape up until the end of the season unless like some big buffs change things. This is where we see Subtlety being in A tier. Elemental has turned a lot of heads with the recent buffs, and I'm not yet putting it into S+ here. Depending on when you see this video, we've recorded this just after the buffs have been announced, with Elemental getting a lot of single target value, which of course helps. It helps to have damage in bosses when it comes to Mythic Plus, although you do want to have priority damage, and just with the nature of the Elemental playstyle, you don't really have that much priority damage. You just spam Giga AoE, which is good. You need Giga AoE. You let that priority to the Arcanes and the, I guess, Havocs, if you end up playing the Havocs in any case. However, as it stands right now, Elemental seems to be the Shaman spec to take because Enhancement is down a tier, all the way down into A. It's not bad. It has been bugged, so people weren't able to test the Totemic hero talent up until we've recorded this video, and I still have my doubts that it's going to be way higher. I feel like there are a lot of other melee DPS specs right now that are doing really good. That doesn't mean that Enhancement doesn't have a lot of damage. I was also been able to compete with Frost DK on occasion. It's just that Enhancement's damage profile is very long and very cooldown reliant, as opposed to other specs that can just go almost all of the time. Affliction has been doing a lot of damage. I've played Affliction and I've been doing a lot of damage. Now, I think I have Affliction also here. Now, this is also kind of like a cope. I would love to see Warlock in the meta for sure, but it doesn't really bring a lot of group value. You don't have a buff to bring to a group where people just want to stack value all the time. And gates can be good depending on the situation and if the skips are very necessary, since I'm not sure how skips will shape up in the next season. Hellstones are definitely very good, but aside of that, you're just a very immobile class with a very shitty kick, well, for Affliction anyway, and at least you're tanky, I guess, but you do have big burst potential in big AoE, so that's something good. And with the Malevolence, and I guess even with the Soul Harvester, depending which hero talent becomes the best, you might have a 1-minute damage profile that can be good. Demonology, I think this is still A tier, so it might be better than Affliction. Demonology has just been nerfed by a lot, actually, and it's unclear exactly how big the nerfs are. Maybe some people have already done the Sims. It was the premier Warlock spec to push keys with on the PTR, and if we made this video like a week earlier, it might have been S or S+ tier in terms of the overall performance. It's probably still going to be good in dungeons, but it might not have the priority damage or the single target damage that you might need from a spec as well, whereas Affliction has just had its single target buffed, so we don't know exactly which one of these will be the better one. If you would have to choose, if both are equal, you'd probably choose Affliction since it has an actual interrupt. You actually have some utility with the pets, as opposed to Demonology that cannot get an imp for Dispel, that cannot get a Fell Hunter for the interrupt, and you don't want the axe toss from the Fell Guard to interrupt because it stuns, and you want mobs to be grouped up, and if you stun it in place, then it's just going to start casting again once the stun wears off. Kind of a similar discussion with Destruction, however, it seems like it might have more issues performing than the other specs at the moment. Destruction was always a spec that used to scale a lot with AoE, and they have removed the Inferno talent, by the way, because some people were confused from our last video that I said Infernal. I said Inferno, I'm pretty sure, but if I hadn't, then I apologize. I did mean the Inferno talent, which is when Rain of Fire hits targets, you generate or have a chance to generate small soul shards. Now that's gone. I played Destruction. It didn't really feel like I had a soul shard problem in AoE. It was definitely obvious that I wasn't generating as many soul shard as before. And I don't necessarily... Inferno was cool. Spamming Rain of Fire is very cool, but if they can take that nerf to their talents and shift it into something that has a little bit more agency from the player, that would be great. We haven't seen that yet. We have seen Destruction have decent single target damage with the buffs to Chaos Bolt and all of that, but I don't think that's enough to push it any higher for now at the very least. When it comes to arms, it's probably the better of the warrior DPS specs. However, a similar discussion to Balanced Druid, to Havoc as well. If you're going to want a warrior in your group, you're probably not going to take the DPS ones. You might take Prot Warrior since it's probably the best choice at the moment. If you are playing a physical comp group and that comp maybe runs a Brewmaster, then maybe that's when arms will shine at the at that particular time, and maybe that warrants it being a little bit higher. I just haven't seen a lot of really good logs on arms. Either I just didn't catch them, or the best arms players just weren't playing PTR at the time. But I just wasn't impressed whatsoever with arms, and definitely not impressed at all with Fury, even though the buffs have been there. Even the top Furies that are just crushing it on the PTR can barely hold a candle to the S tier specs, let alone the S plus tier specs. So I don't have high hopes for this at the moment. And similar discussion to Windwalker, although it seems to be doing a little bit better than Windwalker, you're AoE capped. You're never really going to shine outside of specific comps that just pull very tiny very often. Maybe that will be the way to go, although I doubt it in dungeons like maybe Gambit. I'm sure players will find a way to play the fish sticks so that you can actually pull about 20 to 30 Murlocs at a time, because that shit is glorious. But if a trick for fighting stuff like fish sticks isn't actually found, then maybe Fury and specs like it can actually shine, where you can actually pull 5, 6, maybe 8 mobs at most, where you won't gimp your Fury or your warriors in general that much, and they can actually shine in the physical comp groups. But this is how it looks at the moment. It is a meta prediction, by the way, and it is based off of the data that we've analyzed, not just our feely, crafty guts and what we've seen as we've played. Through the PTR, through almost all of the specs except the healers at the moment, which is why this is mostly pure DPS, and it is a little bit of speculations because it is a prediction, right? We're assuming things might shape up the way they are based off of what the intent of the class changes are looking to be. But without out of the way, you can still have fun in the game, and this is DPS, but you can actually look at the most fun tank to play and choose it. That's what I wanted to say. And we have a video right here, and sometimes fun is really all that you need in this world.